Today's cryptid is the Kinderhook Blob of New York. Put him on the board, cheese. Hello and welcome back to Creepy American Cryptids. Today's episode takes place in upstate New York, where an unusual blob-like cryptid has been encountered over a span of several decades. During this episode, we will explore the area this undulating anomaly inhabits, the documented encounters with this cryptid, a description of the creature, and a few theories on what the blob monster of Kinderhook may actually be and why it is a lesser-known cryptid. Creepy Cryptids Part 7, The Blob Monster of Kinderhook. The setting. The blob monster of Kinderhook, or simply the Kinderhook Blob, is reported to inhabit the forests surrounding a small town in New York State known as Kinderhook. Kinderhook was named by its original Dutch settlers and translates to Children's Corner. The small town of Kinderhook is located near a lake known as Lake Kinderhook. So as you can see, the settlers of this region were extremely imaginative in their naming practices. The encounters. So let's begin with the recorded encounters with the Kinderhook Blob. The initial sightings of the blob monster occurred during the 1960s, in which at least 6 witnesses reported being eyewitnesses to the appearance of a mysterious, blob-like, floating, ghostly apparition. According to several sources, the blob's appearance was so intimidating and terrifying that it caused at least 2 men who were armed with weapons at the time to run for their lives to get away from the creature. Let's take a quick look at the creature. So here we have an artist's sketch of the blob monster pondering a few things. Here he's a little bit worried. And here, he is a happy friend to all children. Blobby the Blob Monster. 1962. The initial sighting of the Kinderhook Blob occurred in 1962 when a 10-year-old boy, Bruce Hollenbach, was exploring the woods behind his family's home, along with his 7-year-old cousin Chari. Bruce explained that as they were walking amongst the pine trees, he and his cousin suddenly heard a strange, shrill, whistling sound which startled him. Being curious children, they decided to walk in the direction in which they heard the sound occurring. He reports seeing a white, vaguely humanoid-shaped object looking at him from behind one of the nearby pine trees. However, he goes on to state that although he felt that the creature was peering at him, it did not appear to have any type of eyes that he could see. Terrified by this strange encounter, their curiosity quickly turned to fear. Hollenbach and his cousin ran back to his parents' home as quickly as they could, without looking back toward the creature. This would be the only encounter with the creature for the next 2 years. Perhaps the children were also terrified, looking to the Kinderhook Blob as it decided to lay low for a while until making itself known again. 1964. An unnamed man was hiking through the same part of the Kinderhook woods where he witnessed a big white blob gliding and floating down the hill in his direction. The man became so frightened that he turned and ran the opposite direction until he came upon a pond measuring 6 feet across. With the creature still following him, he was so terrified that he was able to leap over the entire pond in one jump. Eventually, after the man was able to summon up some courage, he returned to the scene of the unusual encounter with a friend who was known to be a skeptic of supernatural events. They armed themselves with pitchforks and shovels before returning in case they needed to defend themselves from the creature. However, as they entered the area, his friend turned white as a sheet and was unable to speak as he pointed ahead of them. Directly in front of them, as a white shape that was hovering among the trees began to appear. The pair of men immediately dropped their weapons and ran away from the area to safety. 1978. The third encounter. It is difficult to determine the actual date of the event. Some reports listed as 1964, the same year as the previous sighting, while other reports list the witnessing of the blob as occurring in 1978. Whichever date is correct, the details surrounding the incident remain the same. 2 14-year-old boys were camping in the Kinderhook woods when they heard heavy footsteps outside of their tent. This appearance of the Kinderhook blob is unique, as it is often reported to float rather than heavily stomp or tramp around the forest. Although frightened, the boys found the courage to look outside the tent to see what was causing the noise. They reported seeing a white hovering being that was mostly identical to the descriptions of the previous encounters. A key difference in this incident is the boys describing the cryptid as looking more like a humanoid-shaped ghost than an amorphous blob. Both boys did agree, however, that it appeared to have floated more than it walked, but each boy had a different idea of what they saw. The one boy described the anomaly as a bell-shaped white being. The other boy stated that the figure he witnessed looked more like the Virgin Mary. Although both descriptions seemed vastly different on the surface, there are actually several similarities. For example, a typical sighting of the Virgin Mary often involves floating, a glow around the image, and white flowing robes. Regardless of what they thought they saw or did not see, the creature disappeared only moments after it was sighted. The beast quickly vanished into dense, thick woods, leaving the boys bewildered and frightened by the experience they had just witnessed. 2017. The next encounter with the Kinderhook blob is much more recent, occurring in 2017. During a late-night walk on the edge of the woods, two town locals also caught sight of the Kinderhook blob. They reported hearing a high-pitched, loud screeching sound, followed by a high drop in temperature. As the air chilled around the two men, they saw a white blob around 7 feet tall suddenly appear from the woods. The blob floated toward them at a high rate of speed, causing them to turn around and run from the creature. A final reported appearance of the ample, amorphous apparition also occurred in 2017 in February. The incident is reported by a 15-year-old boy whose house's backyard connects to the Kinderhook woods. He explained that he decided to walk through the woods of his backyard alone to find a spot to build himself a little shed to hang out in, like a treehouse without the tree. The boy goes on to explain that he walked into the deepest part of the woods on his property that involved walking up a hill that eventually led to a plateau on which he planned to construct his shed. After finding the spot and thinking about how he wanted to build the shed, he describes hearing a high-pitched, repeated 5-note whistling sound in the distance. He recounts that he found it odd as it sounded like someone whistling while walking around, and yet he could not hear any leaves rustling, although the entire area was covered in leaves. Apparently the whistling sound was not like that of a bird or an animal, but similar to a human whistling, due to it having a breathy sound. As he returned back to the spot, he decided it was simply a person whistling. However, the whistling became progressively louder and closer, while still consisting of the same 5 notes. Within a minute, the whistling sounded like it was only about 5 feet away from him, coming from all directions at once, and yet he could not see any person or thing making the sound. Beginning to feel uncomfortable with the occurrence, the boy decided to start the 2-minute hike back to his house. After a minute from reaching home, with the whistling sound continuing to follow him, he looked up and saw a strange sight. He described the creature as being humanoid-shaped, with no facial features, and a blurry grayish appearance. He claimed it was flying above him in a counterclockwise pattern with a height of approximately 5 or 6 feet. The boy deduced that continuing at a walking pace was likely far safer than running for fear of exciting the creature into attacking him. He stated that the whistling and floating creature continued to follow him until he stepped onto the lawn of his backyard, at which the whistling stopped and the creature vanished from view. After this event, the boy concluded that he no longer wanted to build a shed in his backyard woods and tried his best to avoid being near that part of the property alone. The creature's bodily appearance is described as amorphous, bell-shaped, or humanoid-shaped. Its color is stated as either being white or gray. Often it is viewed with little to no distinguishable features and no discernible facial features. Movement of this creature has mostly been witnessed as floating without touching the ground, although some reports mention hearing footsteps. This creature's size also varies across reports, with sizes varying from only a few feet tall up to 7 feet tall depending on the encounter. However, this variance in size could be a sign that more than one floating blob inhabits the woods of Kinderhook. Theories. Several theories exist to account for the existence of the Kinderhook blob. A primary theory is that the eyewitness encounters from the 1960s and 1970s were merely pranks, with the recent 2017 occurrence being copycat pranks from someone trying to bring back the mythos of the Kinderhook blob. A secondary theory is that the creature is a ghost of some sort. This theory accounts for the drop in temperature when it appears, and the variances in the size and shape of its physical appearance. A tertiary theory states that it's a legitimate species of creatures stalking the woods in upstate New York. However, the species has gone largely unnoticed and has not yet been officially discovered and classified in any realistic scientific way. Conclusions. Although several reports and multiple theories exist regarding the blob monster of Kinderhook, we still do not have any definitive answers at this time. Even in terms of classification for this cryptid, it currently remains unclassified. The closest classification for this creature is that of a UFO, or a UAF, an unidentified flying object, or an unidentified aerial phenomenon, due to its unidentified nature and the fact that it is an airborne anomaly. If the blob monster is indeed a living creature, the gap between appearances could theoretically be due to the being having an extended hibernation cycle. The significant amount of time between encounters could also be due to the entity being extraterrestrial and having to travel long distances to visit this planet. The extraterrestrial and UAF theories correlate to similar experiences in the area. For example, numerous UAF sightings occurred along with sightings of an 8-foot-tall red hairy humanoid creature around the same time and in the same regions as the blob monster. In connections with the original blob monster sighting in 1962, Hallenbach's grandmother and cousins claimed to have witnessed and pursued the red hairy creature that was later named the Kinderhook creature. So are all these events connected to one another? Is it a coincidence that the UAF sightings, floating blob sightings, and large hairy monster sightings all occurred in the same area at the same time? As stated, we have no concrete answers. However, one thing is for certain. If you do not want to be stalked by floating blobs, huge hairy beasts, or UFOs, you should definitely avoid the Kinderhook woods of New York State. See you next time, folks.